Why are we here? Are our lives already written for us? And what happens after we die? I mean, these are the biggest questions, right? Today, we're going to dive into an explainer that really tries to tackle them head-on from the perspective of speaker engineer Muhammad Ali Mirza. So yeah, let's get right into it. So the speaker kicks things off with this one number to frame the entire conversation: 150,000. According to his research, that's about how many people die every single day. It's a huge, staggering number, and he uses it to cut through all the noise and ground us in what he calls the greatest reality of the universe. Death isn't some far-off idea, it is a constant daily event. And this verse right here, it perfectly captures the core belief. The speaker really zooms in on the specific wording. It doesn't just say, every soul will die. It says, every soul will taste death. From his point of view, that single word changes everything. It suggests that death isn't just an end. It's more like a phase you pass through, a transition from this life into whatever comes next. Okay, so if death is this inevitable transition, it obviously leads to the biggest question of all, doesn't it? What is the purpose of this life that comes before it? What is this all for? The speaker's entire worldview is built around answering this one question. And here it is. This is the central idea. According to the speaker, the Quran is explicit that life and death were created for one main reason: as a divine test. The word used is fitna, which means trial or test. The whole point is to see who, out of all of us, will do the best deeds with the time they're given. So you see, this life, it isn't the final destination, it's the examination hall. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. He applies this idea of a test to everything. It's not just about facing hard times. The speaker explains that both good fortune, what's called higher, and misfortune, char, are just two different sides of the exact same test. Being blessed with wealth, that's a test of your generosity. Facing hardship, that's a test of your patience. They're just different question papers in the same big exam. Okay, but wait a minute. If life is a test, this immediately brings up one of the oldest, most complicated debates there is: destiny versus free will. I mean, if God has a master plan, are our choices really our own? Let's unpack how the speaker tackles this one. And this is an absolutely crucial distinction. He defines taqdir, or destiny, not as some pre-written script that we're all just forced to act out like puppets. No. Instead, he presents it as God's perfect, complete, prior knowledge. The argument is that God already knows the choices you will freely make, but, and this is the key, he doesn't force you to make them. The choice is still yours. His knowledge is just absolute. In this slide, it just lays it all out perfectly. The speaker basically separates life into two columns. On one side, you've got what's predestined, stuff you have zero control over, like where you were born, who your parents are, what you look like. For those things, there's no accountability. But on the other side, you have your choices, your actions, your beliefs, your moral compass. And for all of that, you have total freedom. And because of that, you have full responsibility. To really hammer this point home, he uses this really powerful analogy. He says, okay, just imagine for a second that you've been pushed into a vast, churning ocean. You're out there struggling just to stay afloat. and you have no idea how you even got there. And then you see a rescuer on the shore. This represents the prophets, and he's yelling instructions, telling you exactly how to swim to safety. So the speaker asks, what's the logical move here? Do you start swimming, following the instructions, to save your own life? Or do you just tread water, wasting precious energy, demanding to know who pushed you in and why they did it? The whole point of the analogy is that the rational choice is to focus on what you can do to swim instead of getting paralyzed by the questions about your circumstances that you can't answer right now. All right, so this focus on our choices and our actions, it leads us to another one of those deep, heavy questions every single person has asked at some point. If there is a just and merciful God, why is there so much suffering in the world? For an answer, the speaker points directly to verses like this one. From his perspective, a huge chunk of our suffering is a direct result of our own actions, both as individuals and as a society. He argues that something like climate change is a perfect modern example, a global misfortune that humanity has collectively earned through our own choices and actions. But it's more than just a consequence. The speaker outlines how hardship can actually serve a spiritual purpose. For one, it can be a tool to kind of chip away at our own arrogance. It often forces us to become more God-oriented when we finally realize we're not in control of everything. And maybe most importantly, it can be a catalyst, a wake-up call that pushes us to turn back to a better path. But you know, that doesn't explain everything. Of course not. We all see terrible injustices in the world that seem to go completely unpunished. We see suffering that feels totally random and unfair. So if we don't always get perfect justice in this life, where and when does it happen? And here, we come right back to that core analogy. This world is the exam hall, not the courtroom and not the graduation ceremony. You don't get your final grade the second you finish a question. The speaker's point is that expecting perfect, instant justice in this life is like demanding your professor grade your final exam while you're still writing it. The full, complete, and perfect justice that's reserved for the day of judgment, after the test is over for everyone. And a key principle of that final justice is absolute individual accountability. Absolute individual accountability. He uses this verse to strongly argue against the idea of inherited sin or the concept that children might pay for the sins of their parents. In this view, on the day of judgment, you are responsible for you and only you. Nobody else will carry your burdens, and you won't be asked to carry theirs. So the process he lays out is actually very clear. Step 1. Your actions in this life, your exam answers, they're all recorded. Step 2. You and you alone are held accountable for the choices you freely made. And then Step 3. Based on that personal record, a perfectly just outcome is delivered in the hereafter. So what about those who pass the test? Well, the speaker describes the ultimate reward as the perfect solution to all of life's struggles. Paradise is presented as a state where the very things we fear and suffer from in this life are gone forever. Eternal life, so no more death. Everlasting,